Well, here we are again, folks. Wow. So proud to be with you today. Do you know that when lightning strikes, you're hoping that you're not too close to it? Have you ever been close enough to lightning when it struck and make your hair just stand up on your arms and on your head, and just you could feel it in your whiskers? And when lightning strikes, sometimes it strikes too close to us and gives us the feeling, awesome feeling, wow, we just escaped being burnt to a crisp or being hit. You hear all the time around the nation about, in the United States of America especially, lightning striking people, and it's seeking a ground, and if you're standing there and you're the ground, wow, you're in trouble. Well, you know that God has struck out of heaven many times since he made this nation, made this world. He has had to strike nations with his lightning. His lightning sometimes is not a shriek just coming out of heaven and a thundercloud and such, but it's some universal thing. Right now, God has been speaking in the year 2015. Right at the end of 2015, the first of 2016, God has spoken to the United States of America, the nation of America, in a drastic change of weather. The weather has whirled and twirled and dumped inches and inches, never ever before in certain areas, unheard of amounts of rain. God has had to bring to halt, bring to the knees states and cities to places to where they will stop and look and say, what's happening? God, what are you doing? See, our nation, our cities, our states, our people do not know that God's in control. He's in control of the weather. He can turn it around. He can make it go wherever he wants it to go. He can do what he wants to do with it. He can cause houses to be covered completely with water in a few minutes. He can cause many people to meet their Maker. When I meet my Maker, I want it to be God himself. When he's ready for me to come home, no matter what way it is, I want to be able to meet him. I want to be able to meet him with a 100% clear conscience. I want to be able to meet my God with my life clean. Wow, Brother Peter, you're speaking on the YouTube today. You teach Sunday school. You pass tracts. You witness to people. You do all of these things, but are you squeaky clean? Are you 100% clean, Brother Peter? I have to repent today and say, no, I have things I'm working on. I have some things unsettled. Do you have things of the past unsettled? Until God brings those things to your mind, they're okay. But if God ever brings something to your mind, you need to take care of it. Do you have, since you've been saved, the 40-something years you've been saved, do you have something in your saved past that you could do something about or take care of, or you could let it be known, or make an apology somewhere? Do you need to do that? If God has brought you to that thought and that realization that that thing is hanging somewhere, you need to take care of it. You need to remove it. It's like my coat rack in the hall behind me. Every now and then the wife will say, every now and then she'll say, we got too many coats hanging on that rack. Let's take care of some of them and put them somewhere else. Because when you walk in the door, they're in the way. Well, if God shows you something in your life that is in the way of your spiritual life, that is in the way between you and God. And every time you try to pray, God says, you need to take care of this little thing. You say, well, God, it's been hanging there for years or something. Well, it's all right. No, you need to take care of it. And you need to take care of it. And so, Peter, you need to take care of some things. So I'm working on that. But meanwhile, while I'm working on it, I'm not going to quit going forward, and I'm not going to quit walking on the ground that I'm walking on. I'm walking on just ground. I'm walking on ground by faith. That in spite of the fact I may have some problems, and when I die, I'm probably going to have as many problems as I got now, maybe more. Why? Because I'm a human being. And every time I got a finger pointing out, I got 3 pointing back. And I got 3 fingers pointing back at me at all times. Let's look at Zephaniah. Little bitty book. A book that has a pronunciation by it called judgment. Judgment. The prophet pronounces judgment. Chapter 1, 3 through 8. Get your Bible, pause your machine, get your Bible, move all the way into the New Testament, going back from the New Testament. You'll go back, you'll find the book of Habakkuk, and you'll find the book of Micah, and you'll find the book of Nahum, you'll find Micah. And just keep backing up. Just keep backing up. And after Micah, you'll find Jonah. And then you'll find Amos. Wow, these are beautiful books. These are all of these. If you just take these little books, one at a time, get you a good Bible and study it. You'll find Joel. Wow. How God spoke through this little servant of him. All these people were reading these names. Now, they're people just like you and I. And they were servants of God. Joel, the prophet of Judah. See, God used in different areas different prophets. I live in a little town called Grantville. And I'm Peter Hutchins, the speaker and preacher in Grantville, Georgia. We came back, we found Daniel, and then we found Ezekiel. We're backing up into the Old Testament. And as we back up, Ezekiel now is a rather large book written by a man called Ezekiel. God called this man, Ezekiel, even though he was carried away into Babylon by the Babylonians, God used him between the first and final deportation of Judah. And there, like Daniel, remember Daniel was carried away into Babylon. It didn't change Daniel from being a follower of God. Because he was captive of another country, did not make him a countryman of that country. He was still Daniel the Israelite, even though he was in a Babylonian country. He didn't change, and God saw fit. We got the little book of Lamentations, and in the little book of Lamentations is, what is the word lamentation? That's weeping, that's crying, that's shedding tears, that's being sorry for your place that you're in. That's what Lamentations are. And then we had the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a weeping prophet. He came along and he wept and he cried for the people. And he pronounced, look, you folks, you have got to get out of this place that you're in. You have got to start following God. You can't follow God with one foot and the devil with the other foot. You got to have both feet on the same side of the fence. If you're going to follow God, you got to follow him all the way. And people didn't like Jeremiah. He was hated by the people. They threw rocks at him. They said, you ain't got no business telling us about this. You are disturbing our sinful life. We are enjoying our sinful life, and you'll come along telling us God don't like it? Well, we don't want to hear about God right now. We want to enjoy what we're enjoying. This is where the world and the United States of America are right now. They don't want to hear about God. Where does a man go to that doesn't want to hear about God? He becomes a member of ISIS. A person that has literally lost their sensible mind and gets a gun and goes out and shoots a whole bunch of people. What has happened is he has become demon-possessed. And the Bible said the devil can take at will a man that follows the devil. If you follow the devil at will, then we're backing up now. We're going to Zephaniah. We're backing up and we're passing Isaiah. Well, as we pass Isaiah, let's see who he was. Isaiah was one of the first prophetical books prophesying in such a great way the Messiah that many of the things in the book of Isaiah, like in Isaiah 53, says he was stricken, he was smitten, talks about Jesus hanging on the cross, and talks about him literally exactly how it happened when it happened 1,000 or so years later. And Isaiah prophesied it. Who were these men that we're talking about, that we're backing up through? They were men like you and I, but God took them and had them write a book. Then we back up to the book through, going back through Ecclesiastes. As we pass back through Ecclesiastes, we're going to see this is a book of human writing, that the way of a man will come to destruction if you follow your own way and your own being rather than God. And we back up then and we've come to the same man that wrote Ecclesiastes, wrote the book of Proverbs. And these are a few proverbs of him and some of others, and they are a book of action. A book of action, a book of if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. You can do some things and boy, you have good results. You can do other things and you have bad results. So therefore you need to find out what are the good things in the book of Proverbs that you need. What are those good things and what are the bad things? And you need to come to those and you need to find out what they are. Now, we're passing back through Psalms. We're flipping back through the book, the Bible. We come to the book of Job. Who was Job? Job was a man righteous in the eyes of God, who had many children, who had much. God allowed this to be one of the richest men in the whole land. Well, the devil came against Job. He looked at him and he said, "Hey, God." Devil talking to God face to face, brazen old rascal. He's already been cast, knows he's going to burn forever in hell, and all those that follow him are too. But he was brazen enough to come up face to face to God and say, listen, what about this one or that one? And God said, "Have you tried my servant Job?" God's fixing to take his hand off one of his servants and all that he's gave him, the protection of him for a few minutes, and say, "This man will not sin." And the devil took hold of him and shook him to his eye teeth, killed his children, his animals, dispersed his stuff around the land, did everything. Yet Job did not curse God. His wife said, "Why don't you curse God and die?" And Job said, "Oh, foolish woman, how can I curse the God that is the one that made me where I am?" And as we back up, we come to the book of Esther. The book of Esther was a little Jewish girl who God sent over to marry a heathen king and to deliver. Because of her, God delivered the whole nation of Israel. What was the big deal, Brother Peter? You know what the big deal was? She was obedient in her time. Are you obedient in your time? Are you obedient in the place where God has you? If you are, then God can use you just like he used Esther. God's using me in my time where I am. Do you know the more the Lord uses me, the more heathen I feel? The more God uses me, the more I realize personally that I don't deserve to be used. If the devil had his way, he would crush me with my own mind of doubt that I'm not worthy to be used, and I'm really not. But God uses me anyway, and he's chose to use me. Then we come back to, we're backing up to Nehemiah. Wow, a servant of God that was obedient. Has a man just like me and you. And God comes to him one day and he says, hey Nehemiah. Nehemiah says, yes, Lord, what's the deal? And God says, I need to use you. I want you to be my servant. And what's going to happen is I'm going to allow the children of Israel to be taken captive by a king, and you're going to be sent down there. But what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to give you a position. And that position is going to be, you are going to be the king's cupbearer for a few years. Now you're a young man, and you're going to be a servant. So as you become the king's cupbearer, and you're going to be down in the palace in Shushan, and I'm going to put the desire of the king's heart to give you your desire when you ask him later on in life. Well, what did Nehemiah have to do? He had to stay in place. He had to stay where God put him. I personally have seen in my 40-something years of being saved in the church that I'm in, I have seen people pack up and leave when God put them where they are. But they say, well, I'm here, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be yet, what I'm doing. Well, you're learning. You're growing. You're getting in. Don't jump out of where you are. If you jump out of where you are and you're not supposed to, wherever you land, you're going to be like a round peg in a square hole. And those holes by that round peg, those four corners, everything's going to fall through them holes and you won't get nothing. Because you're a round peg in a square hole, you don't belong there. So until you pull your peg back out of that square hole and put it back where it belongs, God's not going to be able to use you. We've had some return. I've had a great answer to prayer. We have a man in our church, the first day he came there, I knew that God sent him. I knew God was going to use him. And I knew pretty much what God was going to use him for. And I knew his calling and his choosing. And he didn't. Now he packed up and left. And here, a year later, he comes back. God sends him back. He had to eat some crow. Let me tell you a little something. You may need to eat some crow and get out of the dangerous spot you're in and get where you're supposed to be. If you're not where you're supposed to be, you need to find that out. That's what Zephaniah was talking about to the children of Israel. You need to find out where you belong, folks. You're in the land of God. The fact is you belong to God. The reason for your trouble is you're running away from God and the name of God, and the results is going to be misery and unhappiness, and you're not going to be profitable until you get back where you belong. If you're out of position, find out where you do belong. Don't try to go somewhere and be King Farouk when you're not. You go in there humble. You come before God humble and ask him, say, Lord, have mercy on me and show me that I can be in the center of your will. That's where I want to be, in the center of your will. Nehemiah was in the center of God's will. Then we back up to a little fellow called Ezra. Who was Ezra? He was an everyday Joe, just like you and me. He was the everyday guy. He was the first of the post-captivity books. Before the children of Israel went into captivity, here's Ezra telling them, hey, if y'all don't straighten up, you're going to go into captivity. And they said, get out of here, old man. We don't want to hear you. We don't want to hear nothing you got to say. Just go on. And I've had people tell me that. And so God put them under Cyrus and in the Babylonians again. And they had to remain there for a period of time. But oh, how wondrous when they did follow God, how he took them out. Then you come to 2 Chronicles. We're backing up, remember now. 2 Chronicles, a book that chronicles the history of the children of Israel. 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Chronicles, that's the word. What it does is what it says. The word chronicles is what it is. It's the history, the backing up of the children of Israel. And it gives a statement of them as the nation, God's nation, and how they got where they got, and how they ended up in trouble through disobedience. Disobedience always brings a reproach. It'll bring a reproach on me. It'll bring a reproach on you. Like the book of Kings, Chronicle is the book of the Jewish canon. What is the canon? The canon is what you and I have in our hand. This is the Word of God. Jesus said, in the beginning, I was the Word. I was with God, and I was made flesh, and I came and dwelt among you. And now I'm leaving this canon for you. And this canon is this book. And he said, this book is me, if you please. I am the Word of God. So I'm going to the cross, and then I'm going back to the Father. But if you want me, I'll come live in your heart, and I will give you myself in a book. You can hold me in this book. You can handle me in this book. When you're handling this book, you're handling Jesus Christ. Just as much as if you were talking to him in the flesh, he will talk back to you through his words. His words are past, present, and future. They are triune. They are three things. They were written in the past, for the present, and for the future. They fit the people of the past, they fit the people of the present, and they fit the people of the future. The only book on earth that is a living book is the Holy Bible. And I prefer the King James Version, which you say, well, that's some King James. Who was he writing the Bible? He didn't write the Bible. He sanctioned God's people to write the Bible, and by doing that, he got his name stamped on it. But he sanctioned some people to sit in a room and to write the Bible, translate the Bible into the King's English, so that you and I could have it in our English. And that's the way God chose to bring it down to us. And this king got his name stamped on it. We come back to 2 Kings now. We're backing up toward the front of the Bible. And here's 2 Kings. Why did God have to use kings? God was the king of the children of Israel. God himself revealed himself to the children of Israel. But the children of Israel said, hey God, these people around us and these heathen nations, they have kings. And we want a king. God said, I am your king. I'm your king. And they said, God, we want one we can see. We want one with flesh. God said, look, I'm the right king for you. If you'll just do what I say, and what I say to do, follow me, you'll never have any problems. And they said, no, we want a king with flesh, with skin on. God said, all right, I'll give you one. So they started getting some kings. And out of the many kings there were, and My mind's not letting me recall exactly how many there were, but there was only just a couple of good ones. All the rest were wicked kings and ruled wickedly. And you and I today are still seeing the records of those kings. We can go back and read them and see the leaders of our world today and the kings of our world today and see how that's not a good thing. To have this one potentate, this one king, earthly potentate. God is the only real potentate. But to have a man that rules over like a country like we hearing in America in these days about over there in the Korean lands, how this guy has got everybody under his thumb, and it's rule and reign with a thumb of rule and reign. Hey, you step out of line with me and you're dead. One of these other guys that are mine right here beside you, you say something you're not supposed to say, and he's required to kill you, and we'll do it in a second. And so that's where we came with the kings. Now we're backed up to 2 Samuel, headed toward the front of the Bible from the back. And as we go into 1 and 2 Samuel, here is a man that God sent to chide the children of Israel to do what God would have them do. Would they listen to him? No more than they will today. No more than they will today. It is very, very few people today would come to a church. Say a city official. He's in a high place in the city. And something has been brought before him that's bigger than he is, and he doesn't know the answer to it. Do you think that he's going to come down to the First Baptist Church or a church and say to the man of God, could you give me some advice here? What would be the godly thing here to do? Just say we're voting on liquor. The man of God's man would tell him that liquor has never, ever profited a nation. It has never profited a city. It has never profited a town. It has never profited anything. I would stand my ground against it if I were you. And he could say this to the preacher, well, I'm a head official up there, and they're going to knock me out of my position. I can tell you this right now. Whoever you are in that position, you'd be better digging a ditch somewhere, making $10 an hour, than you would sitting up running a city and bring a reproach on it by bringing liquor into it. We came against liquor in the little town that I was in LaGrange, Georgia, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. 40-something years ago, we came against liquor. Within 5 years, they doubled the police force. Within 10 years, it was now out of hand. In 20 years, they've got Sunday buying liquor now. You can buy liquor on Sunday. I mean, I'm talking about in the last 40 years, there was a time 50 years ago you couldn't open a store on Sunday. Now you can sell liquor on Sunday. Now you have crime 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And now you have hundreds of thousands of vehicles on the road, and they say that 90% of all accidents involve some kind of drugs, some kind of liquor or drug, where liquor has taken people to drugs. Listen, you can vote these things in, but that doesn't make them good. They're still just as bad. The worst part of it is you're going to get the reproach of that when you die, and you're going to face it. If you die and go to hell, you're going to face the evil that you've done in hell. If you've been a double evil, you're going to have a double harder place. And if you die and go to heaven, and you rejected liquor and you got knocked out of your job down here, God's going to give you a much better job up there forever. Forever. You can swap your earthly job for a forever job that's better. If you're in a job that causes you to do opposite of what God would have you do, you need to get out of that job. Just do what God would have you do, and then if they fire you, you're fired for a good reason. It'll be written down in the annals of heaven as something good for you, and you'll have it forever. All right, let's back out of Samuel, and let's go into Ruth. Ruth, a little woman that God sent to be the peg that changed the whole nation of Israel, was Ruth. She was the little peg that changed the whole nation. Wow. I look at it like this. Say, here you are. You're working with a piece of wood, and you get a splinter in your finger, and you don't pay too much attention to it, and you pull it out. And a week later, you begin to feel some pain, and you begin to notice your finger has turned black. And you hadn't paid enough attention to it, and now you've got a black finger. You've got to do one or two things. You've got to go get some antibiotics, or get a shot or something, or get the finger cut off. Well, Israel was at a place where they had that black finger. And God said, I'm either going to have to cut you off, or I'm going to have to change your ways. He sent a little woman along named Ruth. And it's a fairly lengthy little story, even though it's a very short story in a sense. It's only, a couple chapters long? How long is it? Ruth is only 4 chapters long. But it is a 10-year period in the life of the children of Israel. And it shows a picture of them going away, these boys going away from their land. And that's a picture of the whole country doing the same thing. And then it shows a picture of a person being grafted in, coming back into the land, bringing another person back in with them who's a spiritual person. And that one person, Ruth, changed the whole land back to God by following what God said for her to do. Got her name written in the Bible. What do you think the likelihood, if there's going to be a new Bible written for the millennial reign? Now, in the millennial reign, God's going to serve, but he said, my word's never going to pass away. And so if he was writing another Bible for another world, which he's going to have another world one day, God has many worlds. We don't know how many worlds God has, but that's beside the point. Right now we're talking about, if he was writing a Bible for another world, would you be in it? Would your name be in it? Here's little old Ruth. She was a Moabitess. She was an outcast, considered an outcast by the Jewish people. She was not even supposed to be grafted in to the Jews. And here she yields her life to the Jewish man, Boaz, who's taking the picture here, if you please, of God and this Moabite woman. God has come to the United States of America, who is not a Jewish country, who is not a Jewish state. We are Gentiles. And he has come to us like Ruth went to Boaz and said, come to me like Ruth came to Boaz. And I'm going to do for you what Boaz did for Ruth. Read the little old 4 chapters in the book and put yourself in as a Gentile Christian, coming in to a Jewish Savior. Jesus was a Jew, hung on a cross, shed his blood for you and I as the Son of God, that we could have salvation. And if we'll come to him, we will get all the rewards that Boaz gave this woman. When she accepted, just before she accepted, boy, he started pouring mercy on her. He told them people, leave her alone now. Don't you molest that woman. Don't you touch her. Don't you go near her. And by the way, you leave some handfuls of grain for her on purpose so that when she goes home, she'll have a full basket. And that was the wooing of the man to her. And God has wooed the United States of America. He has gave us baskets and baskets and baskets full of food. We have spit on him. We have turned our back on him. We go to restaurants. Thousands of people daily go to restaurants. We sat in one, my wife and I did, and said grace yesterday. But we see hundreds of people come in. Some of them call themselves Christians. They come in and eat and don't even say grace. They just sit down and start shoveling. Listen, God's not happy with such as that. A nation that he has given to us, and they come do that. And then we come to the book of Judges. Judges is a fairly long book. And, well, it's fairly long in a sense. In another sense, it isn't. The events of Judges covered 305 years. And those 305 years were showing the children of Israel that they were going to have to be judged by a judge. They chose judges just like they did kings. Remember when we were looking at kings? Now they had judges. But these judges were supposedly good judges. And some of them were warriors. There were 13 men raised up in Israel to be judges over Israel. And if the children of Israel listened to most of those judges, they were good judges. They were good for the country. And you remember, though, they got tired of the judges and decided they wanted kings. The book records 7 apostasies of the children of Israel. They were in an apostate state. They left the will of God. I would dare say today, in my day, right now, the United States of America is totally apostate against God. We have left God out of everything. We are taking God out of everything. We won't allow him in our schools anymore. We don't want him in our courtrooms. We don't want the 10 Commandments to be revealed. I got news for you. That every single solitary moral law in the United States of America, or anywhere in the world for that matter, came out of this book, God's book. Every moral law that's any good came from God. Any one of it came from God. And it came from this book. And now people want to do away with the very book that brought the law on, and they want to take this million books sitting behind some man we see on the news, and he's standing in front of a library of worldly books when he could stand in front of one book, the Bible, and bring the United States of America back to God. But he's standing in front of this set of legal books that bring everything back to naught, to where there's no real answer. Every one of those books that you bring a judge to the total end of the thing, and he'll tell you right quick, we're going to have to handle it this way because there's no real remedy answer. There's no real answer. There's no real remedy. To lock this man up in jail has not remedied the problem. It has caused another problem that has become now bigger than we are. We've got so many people in jail now, we can't afford to support them. Well, then you come back to Joshua. Joshua, the great leader. Joshua, the man of God. Joshua, had a divine calling from God. His events cover 26 years in the land of Israel. And he's a man that independently, sometimes God had to use him independently, just him, to stand up and do the battle, fight the battle for Israel. Man, what an illustration. We find him in the New Testament. We find the recordings of what this man did and how he took the people as the head man for Moses, and how he came out and fought the battles that he fought. And the word is out and into. He brought them out of bondage into the land of Israel, into the land where they could be free Israelite peoples, not under the bondage of Egypt. It took a man like him to come out and fight the battles the way God said to fight them. If you were facing an army of 385,000 and you were a handful out there on the hillside, how would you fight them? You would fight them the way God says to fight them. How does God say to fight them? God says, if you're going to fight these people, do it the way I show you, and we'll win the battle. He said, you take a handful of men out here, and you send them out on the mountainside at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you surround the camp, and you give them all a candle, and you give them a picture, a earthen picture, and you give them, they can pick up a rock and break that picture, and when they do, the sound will go down through the valley. And when that sound goes down through the valley, and this light shines round about the camp, these people are going to go crazy. And that's what he does. He takes a handful of men, and he puts them around the mountainside, and here's his people in the valley. When they break that picture and make that noise and that light shines, somebody in the camp hollers, "The Israelites are upon us, the Israelites are upon us." Well, they've put out all their lights. They have got in a drunken stupor. In their pride and arrogance, we don't need any God, we don't need anything, we just go take these children of Israel. Well, all of a sudden somebody draws a sword and whacks the shadow or the figure next to him. Next thing you know, they're all whacking each other. Next thing you know, the whole bunch kills each other, and the Israelite didn't have to lift a finger. All they had to do after that, when it got daylight, is drive them out of the land. By the way, every time this kind of thing happened, do you know that those guys left their horses? They left their chariots. They left their clothes. They left their swords. They left their rings, their necklaces, their earrings, their jewelry, their machinery. They left every single solitary thing that they brought in with them. They left it for the Israelite people. The booty of that camp was something. Just think, 385, the wares of 385,000 men, their belts and their buckles, their swords, their buttons, their clothes, their shoes, their shirts, their jackets. Think about it. Every single, their tents, everything. Everything they had that they left behind, the Israelites had it. Do you think God did not provide? Yes, they had food too. All the food that they had brought with them, all the dried camel and the dried meat, all of the stuff that they had, the provision that they had to sustain a man in that kind of livelihood, and that the way it was then, God gave it all to the children of Israel. Every bit of it. He delivered it into the hands of the children of Israel. And they had it all. No wonder later on we see that they had enough gold and enough stuff to get in trouble with. Listen, wealth is not always good. I would rather be, and I've said this before, and managed to maintain it for a good while, be one of the poorest men on earth, but one of the happiest men on earth. I raised 6 children and a wife, and my wife and I, 2 of the happiest people that ever lived since 1972. When I got saved, and she got saved, started following the Lord, and it's 1972. We've been 2 of the happiest people on earth. Raised 6 children in a 3-bedroom house. Actually 2 bedrooms and a hallway for a while. And we've been happy. Have you had any money? No, I haven't had any money. Everything I've got right now, I own it. Why do I own it? Because God allowed me to build it. God gave me the ability to build it. He gave me the material to build it with, and supplied every need that I've had. Ever since I got saved, whenever I'm following Him, all my needs have been met. As long as I follow Him, my needs will continue to be met. The day that I start sliding away and not following Him like I should, my needs will be cut off. The meeting of my needs will get to a place where I won't be able to meet them. I've seen it. I've watched it happen. I watched God bless people, and they took it the wrong way and took it upon themselves and said, look at what I've done. Look at what I've amassed. And God said, wait a minute now. I gave that to you. But if you want to forget that I gave it to you, go ahead and I'll take it away from you. And I've seen God do that. I've seen a man lose his wife, his family, his house, his car, everything. End up on the courthouse steps, destitute. Deuteronomy. Genesis. Well, we're backing up. Remember, we're backing up. From Joshua, we're backing up to Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy was a book that God had to deal with the people. And as He dealt with the people, it covered about approximately 40 years. And the 40 years of Deuteronomy is the dealing of man and God. God dealing with His chosen nation. He chose a man named Moses, delivered the children from Egypt, the Israelites from Egypt. He used a man named Moses to lead the people. The most unusual man that anybody would have picked. Nobody would have ever picked Moses to be the leader that God picked him to be. Nobody would have ever picked me, Peter Hutchins, to do what I'm doing, but God did. I'm probably the least in our church, the church I'm in, I'm probably the least educated person in the church in the sense of school education. But when God saved me, He put me in His book, this Bible right here. I'm able to back up today from Revelation to Genesis in an hour here and give a review of God's book. How can you do that, Brother Peter, a man with no education? I have a Bible education. I've been in this book from Genesis to Revelation for 40 years on a daily basis. I said in an excerpt I did a little while ago, we owe God 16.8 hours a week. If we didn't do anything else but study His Word 16.8 hours a week, He would give us a knowledge of Himself, of His book, of His way, and show us where we can get destitute if we don't follow Him, and where we can have all of the pleasures of the world even in a physical sense, and be spiritually sound and spiritually happy, comforted in our minds, our hearts, and our beings by Him, and have everything that He would have us to have. And that's all we need. So we're backing up from Deuteronomy. We came back through Joshua. And Deuteronomy, by the way, consists of the counsels of Moses. And if the people would hear what God told Moses to tell them, that they would be able to be delivered from all the tough places they were, the first big miracle that is recorded that we see is the parting of the Red Sea. But just before that, if you want to see a real miracle, let me show you this one. God said to the people, you go to these Egyptians and you tell them that you want to borrow all the gold and silver they'll let you have. And I'm going to make their heart be the desire to give you all the gold and silver you can tote. When those children of Israel left that land, they left with enough gold and silver to build the things that were going to be in the tabernacle, in the tent that God had, in the when God was going to have them later on build a temple. All of the wares were going to be made with gold and silver. And God delivered that gold and silver from the Egyptians and also from the people. You remember when Joshua fought them battles, all them people left all the gold and silver that they had with them behind. Left everything behind on the ground. All the iron, all the weapons, all of the swords, all of the shields, all of the chariot wheels, all the brass, all the bronze. I mean, they didn't take anything with them when they died. They left it all behind. I got news for you. If you're stacking up stuff on this world and you're counting on it, you're going to leave it all behind for somebody else. What it may take you 50 years to amass, it may take a grandson or even a son 50 days to destroy it, for it to end, for it to all be gone. Wow. Let's get back in the book. From Deuteronomy, we're backing up to Numbers. Now, Numbers is exactly what it says. It's a numbering book where things were numbered. The events were recorded for the prior 39 years. Everything in the book of Numbers is a record of what happened the 39 years of this book of Numbers. And it gives all the 39 years before the story of Leviticus, what happened there. Leviticus, we know, was a book, the giving of the law. The Levitical law. What was the Levitical law? It involved the people called Levites. Well, who were the Levites? They were the called men of God. Some several thousand called men of God were the Levites. And it was a book of instruction and warning. And that's what it was a book of. It talked about the feast of God. It talked about the anointing of God. It talked about the relationship of the people of God and God Himself. Wow. It talked about the offerings. It talked about the beginning of a congregation of people, God's people being a congregation of God, and looking at Him, and being careful that your offerings were proper, and that they were done in holiness. In Leviticus, God talks about holiness 87 times. He uses the word holiness. These people were supposed to be given to God in holiness, just like we are today if we're Christians. We ought to be given to God in holiness. And then we have Exodus. Of course, Exodus was the book that tells us some different things. It tells us the events and the record of a period of 216 years. What were those 216 years? They were 216 years of captivity, headed for redemption, but it took them all of this time to go out from the world they lived in, and that talking about the world system now is what we're talking about, and also the location where they were, and they were in Egypt in bondage. I love the fact that God gave them, because the Egyptians hated shepherds, and they were shepherds. They said, we don't want you to come into our city, so we're going to put you down on the plain on the outside of the city. So they put them in the land of Goshen, which happened to be the best piece of land, the best piece of property in Egypt. So God put them on the best piece of property in Egypt, where the river came up and watered the land, and they could grow vegetables, they could grow stuff, and they could do things that they couldn't do anywhere else in the city of Egypt up there. I've been over to the pyramids, ain't none but sand. The very city of Egypt's desolate. You couldn't grow a stalk of corn in the city, but down there in Goshen, you could grow anything. And that's where God put them. Wow. And our time is about come and gone. Genesis. What is Genesis? Genesis means the book of beginnings. This is the beginnings. We backed up from down there in Habakkuk, and we backed up in the Bible. Now we're in Genesis. And the events recorded in Genesis are 2,315 years of events are written in the book of Genesis. So that's quite a big period of time, Peter, to be in 50 chapters. Yes, it is. But God says a lot when he says something. If you will take one verse of 7 words and do a word study, I would challenge you to do that. You will be in that word study for weeks. Every word in the Hebrew language had many meanings, had many things. Every name, every single name. The book Genesis, the word Genesis means beginnings. So if you want to research the word Genesis, you can go a long ways. I've got some encyclopedias over here, Collier's. Every now and then I'll be doing a word study, and I'll get in there and I'll find a word that there's 2 full pages in Collier's and a little bitty print. Their font's a little in there. And there'll be 2 full pages trying to exhaust this one word. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And God uses words like that. Bible words are words with great. Elam. This is the English word for God. Elam. We find that in Genesis. Elohim. El. Or El is from God. The first primary deity names of God. God was formed of 3 things. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. He is Elohim, the mighty God, the only true God. And we find in Genesis, he gives us the record of in the beginning. What beginning? For God, there was no beginning, but for man, there was a beginning. When God created the heavens and the earth, he made a beginning for man. He needed not any of it except for fellowship. God wants fellowship. He wants the fellowship of the soul of man. I am fellowshipping with God today, right now, talking on this YouTube. Going through his book. I just backed up through the whole Old Testament in 59 minutes. I was supposed to be doing something completely different, but this is the direction God sent me back through. And I've been proud to be with you, and I hope that you'll take God's book, dissect it over the next whatever period of time God gives you to live. Dissect his book. Put it in your heart and your mind. Learn it. Learn to live what part of it is for you. Learn by the failures of those before us in the book. learn by their failures to try to stay out of their failures. We'll see you next time now. It's Brother Peter, Tidbits from the Word. You have a good life. Bye-bye.